Okay, for this type of problem, all we're going to do is cross multiply. So the numerator on the left will multiply with the denominator on the right. The denominator on the left will multiply with the numerator on the right. And you will have something that looks like this. Okay, and at this point you can distribute and solve for x. It's not really all that difficult. 7 times x is 7x. 7 times 6 is 42. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 3 is 12. And there you go. So now we can solve for the x. We're going to want to keep the x's positive, so we'll cancel from the right side. We've got more on the left, so we want to keep them there. We'll subtract 4x from each side. I have 3x plus 42 is equal to 12. Now I can subtract 42 from each side. I'll have 3x is equal to negative 30, and I can divide by 3, and x will equal negative 10. That's really all there is to it, guys. Okay, here's another problem that we're going to cross multiply on. So the numerator on the left multiply with the denominator on the right. The denominator on the left goes with the numerator on the right. So when you do that, it's going to, that's not right. It's going to look like this, is equal to 3 times 2x plus 8. Now we distribute. 2 times x is 2x, 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2x is 6x, 3 times 8 is going to give us 24. We have more x's on the right, so we'll cancel them from the left. Subtract 2x from each side. We'll have 4 equals 4x plus 24. Now we just subtract 24 from each side. We'll have negative 20 is equal to 4x. Divide by 4. And looks like x is going to equal negative 5. Do not overthink this problem. It is not real difficult. I went through it, I know, kind of quick, but I know that you can also pause and slow down the video if you need to. But most of you, I think, are going to be fine as long as you know how to cross multiply. After that, it's just solving for x. For this problem, we're going to want to get rid of the denominators. Easy way to do that is to just multiply each term by the denominator. In this case, they are common denominators. So we have x minus 6 for our two fractions. So we got x minus 6 here and x minus 6 there for our denominators. If we multiply by x minus 6 on this side, then that cancels off, and we have just the x on top. Well, it'll be a negative x because that negative. Same thing here. We've got x minus 6 here. We'd have to multiply this term also by x minus 6 to get rid of that. But to multiply the entire side by x minus 6, then it ends up, it's really like a distribution. You have to multiply this term and that term by that. So I'll show you what we mean here. Okay, so I've got it written out for you to give you a little bit better visual. And what's happening now is on the right side, the denominator is just canceling out because I'm multiplying by the x minus 6. It cancels the denominator off, which is what the goal is, and we'll have just negative x on the right side. On the left side, we're distributing the x minus 6. So what happens is you have 1, let me write it out here. It'd be like 1 times x minus 6, and then plus, and you have x minus 6 times 2 over x minus 6. So you can just go ahead and cancel that. You don't have to write it all out. That's going to cancel that x minus 6 off, and you're going to have a 2 there. And again, you know, with this, I went ahead and wrote 1 times x minus 6 just so you can see the math. But if it was a bigger number than 1, you would have to distribute that. 1 times x minus 6, we know is just going to be x minus 6. And then we're going to have plus 2 is equal to negative x. So now I'm going to want to go ahead and combine everything on the left side. On my like terms, I'll have x minus 4 is equal to negative x. And I want my x's to stay positive, so I'm going to add x to each side to cancel it off the right. I'll have 2x minus 4 is equal to 0 because everything canceled out. Then I want to add 4 to each side, and 2x will equal 4. And then once I divide by 2 on each side, x will equal 2. And 2 works. It's not one of the excluded values. The only excluded value here would have been a positive 6, because positive 6 minus 6 would have made it a 0, and you can't have a 0 as a denominator. So 2 checks out. This problem is kind of the same as the last one, in the sense that you have a couple fractions with common denominators that you want to cancel out. So we'll just go ahead and set it up like we did before. We're going to multiply each side, the entire side, by our common denominator of x plus 1. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've got it set up. On the right side, the x plus 1 cancels off the bottom, and I have just negative x left over there. Then on the left side, I have 5 times x plus 1. And then the x plus 1 cancels the denominator of x plus 1 out. And I just have 1. And that should have been a plus 1. So let me fix that. Should be plus 1 here equals negative x. All right, so now we don't have any fractions left over. We're just going to go ahead and distribute the 5, make it 5x plus 5 plus 1 equals negative x. Combine everything on the left side. I have 5x plus 6 equals negative x. I'm going to want to go ahead and add x to each side. Now I'll have 6x plus 6 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 6 from each side. So now 6x equals negative 6, and we can kind of see that we're going to divide by 6 on each side, and x will equal negative 1. Now, we have x equals negative 1. If you paid attention on our excluded values lessons, then you can see if that says x plus 1 there, then x can't equal negative 1. That's an excluded value, because if it's x equals negative 1, then it's going to be undefined. So, because we have negative 1 would be the x would be negative 1 plus 1 would make 0. And you can't have 0 as a denominator. So, in this case, there is no solution, because the only solution would be an excluded value of negative 1. So, that can't happen. So, there's no solution.